How to change when the other person also has their own inheritance and is not changing at the same pace. Choosing in relationship. When your choice affects those you love, and they have their own choices that may go in another direction. So far in this series, we have talked about choice as if it were a solitary act. You and your inheritance, you and your patterns, you and your identity. But most of the choices that matter do not happen in a vacuum. They happen in relation. With a partner who has their own inheritance and their own patterns. With a family that has learned to function based on the previous version of you. With friends who built their relationship around who you were. With colleagues who depend on how you have always done things. You make choices knowing they will affect someone important, and that this person has the right to react in a way you cannot control. Choosing in relation means choosing with awareness of the impact, without using that impact as an excuse not to choose, and without ignoring that impact as if it didn't exist. Have you avoided something because you know it will affect someone close? What are you protecting? Yourself, them, or the relationship? We explored in Season 1 how systems resist the change of one of their elements. Let's delve deeper into what this specifically means in intimate relationships. In a close relationship, partner, family, long-term friendship, each person occupies a role that the system has learned to utilize. When one person changes their role, the system loses balance. Not temporarily, structurally. Because the balance was built around the old role. The partner who always yielded begins to set boundaries, and the other partner loses the balance they knew, even if they never explicitly asked for that yielding. The person who was always available starts to prioritize their own time, and the surrounding relationships lose the certainty of access they had, even if they never recognized they had it. Someone who always agreed begins to disagree, and others lose the affirmation they used to feel secure, even if they never knew they needed it. None of these resistances are necessarily bad faith. They are systems attempting to maintain the balance they know. But the impact on the person who is changing is real, because the implicit message is, your change creates problems for me. Your change is nobody else's problem. It's yours. But the impact of your change on those around you is real, and ignoring it doesn't eliminate it. There are three main types of collision between your choice and the choices of those close to you, and each requires a different response. Type 1, direction collision. You genuinely want different things. City, pace of life, having or not having children, career versus family, risk versus security. It's not that one is right and the other wrong. They are different directions that may not be compatible in the same space. This is the hardest type, because there is no compromise solution that satisfies both completely. The real choice here is, does the relationship have space for both directions? If not, which is more central to your identity, the direction or the relationship? Type 2, pace collision. You want compatible things, but at a very different pace. One wants change now, the other needs time. One has processed, the other is still processing. One is ready for the next step, the other hasn't left the previous one yet. This type has more room for navigation, but requires explicit communication about what each needs and a willingness to negotiate pace without sacrificing direction. The risk here is using the difference in pace as an excuse not to move forward, when in reality it's just discomfort with managing the difference. Type 3, impact collision. Your choice does not collide with what the other person wants, but it has a real impact on what they can do or what they lose. The career change that alters the family income. The boundary you set that changes the dynamic of a friendship. The health decision that requires support that the other person will have to give. This type requires honesty about the real impact and a genuine conversation about what is being asked of whom. and whether they are willing to give. There is extensive research on what distinguishes difficult conversations that produce results from those that produce only conflict. John Gottman, a relationship researcher, identified patterns that predict with high accuracy whether a conversation will strengthen or damage a relationship. What doesn't work? Character criticism, defensiveness, contempt, stonewalling. These responses shut down the conversation before it starts. What works? Talking about impact instead of intention, asking genuine questions before giving answers, naming what you need without demanding that the other person agrees. A simple framework for difficult conversations about choosing in relation. 1. Name what you are choosing and why, without asking for permission, but with enough context for the other person to understand. 2. Name the impact you anticipate on the relationship, on the other person, on the system, with honesty about what you know and what you don't know. 3. Ask what the other person needs, genuinely, not as a courtesy before ignoring the answer. 4. Negotiate what is negotiable, pace, form, support, without negotiating direction, if the direction is central to your identity. Have you avoided talking to someone close about your choice? And what have you been putting off? What have you avoided saying? And what do you fear hearing? Not all conversations end with acceptance. Sometimes the other person genuinely cannot accept your change, because the threat to the system they knew is too great, or because the direction collision is real and unsolvable. This is the hardest moment of choosing in relation, because it implies confronting a truth that most people avoid. You have the right to choose, and other people have the right to react to your choice, including distancing themselves, including disapproving, including changing the relationship in ways you cannot control. You do not have control over how others respond to your choice. You have control over whether you choose according to who you are or according to what others prefer you to be. This is not selfishness. It is honesty. Choosing to manage others' reactions is not choice. It is performance. And performance, over time, costs more than the reaction you were trying to avoid. You cannot control who stays when you change. You can choose to be the kind of person worth staying for. Choosing in relation is perhaps the most honest way to choose, because it is done with full awareness of the impact, without the illusion that choices exist in a vacuum. And it is also the most courageous, because it requires saying out loud what you want, even knowing that the other person may want something different, even knowing that the conversation may be difficult, even knowing that the relationship may change. But something happens when you have that conversation, when you choose out loud, in presence, with honesty about the impact. The relationships that survive that conversation become stronger, because they were tested by something real and they endured. The relationships that do not survive your change were not relationships with who you are. They were relationships with who you were. That is visible choice. When your choice affects those you love, and they have their own choices that may go in another direction. Next time, the episode about what no one wants to examine but everyone carries, the regret of choices you didn't make. How to live with it, without the weight of the past paralyzing what you can still do. Visible choice. Season 1. At Posico and Viceville. The choice this episode examines is not simple to name, because it was made before you were aware that you were making a choice. It became a habit. It became an identity. It became the way things are. And the first step to choosing differently is to see what was being chosen and why. Visible choice was built to make visible what is always present but rarely examined. That most of what we call choices are better presented reflections. What was taught, what was inherited, what was modeled by specific environments. All of this operates in decisions that seem the most personal and the most free. There is a difference between deciding and choosing. Deciding is what we do when we process information and come to a conclusion. Choosing is what we do when we have real awareness of the alternatives, including the alternative of not doing what we have always done. This series works exactly on that difference. What has been learned about how to make choices can be examined. What can be examined can be questioned. And what can be questioned can, with time and honest work, be replaced by something that is genuinely yours, and not just the echo of what was taught before you had a voice about what to learn. To take away from this conversation, not a 10-step method, but a question that continues to work after this episode ends. Is this choice, the one this episode named, mine? Or is it what I learn I should choose? The difference between the two is not in the outcome. It is in the awareness with which the outcome was achieved. The choice this episode examines is not simple to name, because it was made before you were aware that you were making a choice. It became a habit. It became an identity. It became the way things are. And the first step to choosing differently is to see what was being chosen and why. Visible choice was built to make visible what is always present but rarely examined. That most of what we call choices are better presented reflections. What was taught, what was inherited, what was modeled by specific environments. All of this operates in decisions that seem the most personal and the most free.